Hi, my name is Martin Perhiniak, and welcome back to the digital art series here on PSD Tuts Plus. Today we are going to create a photo manipulation, or we can call this matte painting on a very basic level, where we start from a photograph and we draw or paint over the photograph to create some fictional elements on it. And as you can see, the final result, we have this massive viaduct or bridge over the river and the whole landscape. And obviously it's a really big, exaggerated bridge. In normal life it won't work, but if you want to do something, it's always do something a bit fun and more unreal, but at the same time you would like to make it look real. Using the tools and techniques that we already learned and discussed in previous tutorials. We are going to use the vanishing point filter in this tutorial, but other than that, most of the tools are going to be exactly the same as in the previous episodes. Also, I'm going to use vector shapes, so hopefully you will still learn some new techniques. And if you want to learn more about matte painting, there are so many great tutorials, more advanced tutorials here on PSD Tuts Plus. This is a very basic one, and it just tries to show you the whole concept, working with a photograph and then just creating something new on top of it and try to match all the light sources and all the shadows and colors of the new object with the original photograph. So let's get started. And I'm going to first create a new layer, and on that new layer I'm going to the vanishing point filter. So it's under the filter menu and then vanishing point. You need to define 4 points which will define a plane in your photograph, and once you have a plane you will see a grid. Now this grid can be extended and you can create more grids. If you hold down Control or Command on Mac on one of the corner points, you can always create a new plane. That's how I created that second plane. And then you need to choose Render Grids to Photoshop option. It's from the filter menu's left corner. Here I again show it, Render Grids to Photoshop. I know it's a bit fast, but if you go back you can see where I chose this option. And because I had a duplicate image by mistake, I have to use a blend mode for this layer, and I just chose multiply. Or actually, sorry, I started again and I just filled it with white, and I just wanted to see the grid itself, and behind the grid I want to see the image. So now I start drawing with the shape tools and the pen tool, and I would like to construct the geometry that I'm going to use for the bridge. So you see I am using free transform tool, the pen tool, and the direct selection tool and selection tool, and I work with these tools. Now I selected the whole part that I just created, and I adjust the size of it, and then I start duplicating it. I think I need a bit more changes on the legs. So now I start to duplicate them, and I would like to create a whole row of this, so I'm always selecting all my layers and then holding down the Alt with the move tool I drag and create new duplicates. Now I've turned all the layers into one smart object, and I'm using the free transform tool to match the perspective that I created with the vanishing point. It's just it's not a real perspective, it's just trying to follow the perspective of the image. And now I went into the smart object by double clicking on the smart object layers thumbnail, and I extending the bridge. When I save that smart object and I go back to the normal document, I can see my changes will update, keeping the whole bridge in perspective still. So that's a really useful thing with smart objects. If you want to learn more about it, check out my basics series. There I talk more about how to work with smart objects. Now I'm experimenting a bit with levels, or using duplicates and creating more levels on this bridge. I just want to see how it works, which one is the best. But then I'm going to decide to use only the line on the top, so just keep it simple. And I'm still thinking whether to use it or not. As you can see, I'm using a duplicate for that, so it's completely non-destructive. I can always adjust it, change it back and forth. But finally I will choose to use only the one on the top. That one. So now for that layer, I create a layer style. First of all, I did a color overlay. I'm playing with that color. I pick the color from the image itself. And once I have this color overlay, I can start masking out the legs, or these legs of the bridge, where are columns on the bridge, which I don't need. So I adjust it to the image itself, and now I can turn off the vanishing point or vanishing lines. So as you can see, now I create a shadow for the bridge. I just duplicated, made a selection from the edges of my layer, and then on a separate layer I just filled it in with black. And now I'm using the free transform tool, and I try to match the shadows of the image. And actually it's not a good lighting situation to easily create shadows, because the light comes from the far right, so the shadows will be very long and they will probably go to the left, which is quite hard to draw on this image. But I still try to match the shadows, and later on I will make some changes to the shadows too. I'm still working on the left side of the bridge. Some details there. So this is with the shadow. I'm adding some more details near the columns. And I'm using colors from the image itself. I just want to make this quickly. I can't spend too much time in this tutorial, so I make it quick and dirty. But you can see that once we add those shadows, the bottom of the columns, it makes it a bit more realistic and believable that this bridge is actually there in the photograph. I'm playing with the layer styles on this layer, and I would like to achieve the texture of like bricks or concrete on the bridge. So for that I'm using the texture layer style, and I try to set the scale and depth and all the parameters the way I need it. I also use bevel and emboss, and I make sure that the bright parts are on the right, because the sunlight is coming from the right. So the highlights are on the right and the shadows are on the left, to match our lighting situation. I'm still not happy with the texture itself, so I'm using a different texture for it. So this is how it looks closer, and probably I will go with this texture. So now I have the color overlay and the bevel and emboss layer styles on this layer, and now I'm going to work a bit more on the bottom side of the columns. I also create the reflection in the river. This is, by the way, the river Danube in Austria. So there's the reflection. I've just made a duplicate reflected down, and then I'm using a gradient for the mask of this layer. So now we have shadows, reflection, texture. We need to work a little bit more on the details of the bridge, mainly where the columns meet the landscape. We need to blend them more into the original photograph to make it look realistic. And just like in any other examples, I try to work completely non-destructively. So that's why I'm using masks, smart objects, and I don't erase, I only work on masks to avoid changes that I can't work with. Okay, so now I'm going to fix the columns on the right, because I'm quite happy with the ones on the left, but here on the right I need to cover the bottom of the columns a bit. So I'm using a separate layer on top of the bridge layer, and I'm picking colors from the original photograph, and I'm just painting over the columns. I also try to play a bit with the shadows, but definitely in this case the light comes from the right, so I can't use these lines. It would be nice to have the light source in the background and then have long shadows coming towards us, but in this case we can't really work with these. So I just deleted the shadows that I created the first time, and I'm going to only keep these ones here on the right because these are a little bit more interesting, even though they are not really matching the light source. I still try to work with them. Sometimes you can cheat to achieve something that you prefer. In this case it's a bit obviously risky. I mean, it can completely change the way the light works if you change the shadows, but I think I can get away with this. In this case you can see I'm fixing the columns, the bottom of the columns, make sure they look a little bit better, and we are almost done. As I said, it's a really simple and basic way or example of using a new object on top of a photograph. But based on this, the way I'm working on this, you can see that what are the steps you need to follow roughly to achieve something like this. Now I'm using an adjustment layer just to play a little bit with the colors. It's a hue saturation adjustment layer, and I'm going to also create something else on this image I would like to have. Just to see the scale, I would like to have a train on top of the bridge as well. So for that I created a new layer, and for that new layer, or on that new layer, I just simply use my brush tool and I create the train, the silhouette of the train. And I want to make it visible, but at the same time I want to keep it really small, because as you can see the buildings at the bottom of the bridge are really small. So if you imagine it's roughly the same size applies to the train. So I try to keep it realistic and small, but at the same time I try to make it visible. And now I was using the smoke brush that we created in a previous tutorial. And we are almost done. I just blur the smoke out a bit and place it on top of the original one. So now we have the bridge and we have the train. So that's all what I wanted to show you, and I hope you found it interesting. The main message of this tutorial is to try to use smart objects and masking to work non-destructively whenever you work with Photoshop. Most of the times in digital painting you won't need these features, but when you start to work together with a photograph, you can always apply these techniques or features as well to your workflow. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope you will join me next time.